What's going on, everybody? This is Chris K from the Burning the Red Shirt podcast, as well as Campus to Canton's Bet on C2C podcast. Make sure to give both a follow, a listen, and check us out. But wanted to discuss tonight's MACtion slate. As always, kind of gross. We have 3 games. The nice thing is they're all pretty tight in terms of Vegas lines. All of them are close to even or up to 3 points. And then the Vegas totals as well are around 49 to 55. So it's not really one game to like really heavily target per se, but there are some injury concerns. So right off the bat, we'll just chat about it real quick. Kent State receivers is probably the injury to follow, right? Cephas, Walker, what's going to happen here? I was looking this morning and basically they said the super vague, everybody is day to day. Didn't name anybody, didn't say anything other than that. So I really appreciate that, Coach. But looking at, starting with quarterbacks here, your top play is going to be Schlee, in my opinion, right? Like, I mean, he's the best quarterback in the MAC or close to it. We didn't really see him unleashed last week because he'd come back from injury. It kind of seemed like they limited him and what he wanted to do. Even then, 12 for 42, 3 for 183 with, no receivers. Walker got hurt pretty early on in that game. Everybody, I think, remembers that. But top guy, maybe he drops down a little bit if Walker and Cephas are out again. But, I feel confident that he'll put up a good performance. Bowling Green is not necessarily the best defense. Kent State, I think, has the best total of the slate. And they're projected, I think, something like a field goal favorite. So Schlee would be the guy I want. I would try to stack him as well, which could get tricky, like I said, due to the injury situation. But next guy on my list here is going to be Cole Snyder. Better pricing, but just a ton of rushing usage in terms of, actually running the football. I think a little bit of this was sacks, right? I think Ohio got to him and the game script kind of hurt him there, but I do think he has rushing potential, and he's got 2 good receivers, and he's done some nice things throwing the football. 6 passing touchdowns in the last 3 games. I don't necessarily want to go crazy, and he's not like a Rourke, Finn, Irons type play for me, but he's certainly in that 50% ownership type range for me going into tonight. Next guy on the list here, I mean, it just gets weird after this. I think there's some issues. I think maybe the least odd guy here is Matt McDonald, but man, that was such a struggle of a game. I mean, look at that last week against Western Michigan, right? So do you love that? Not really, but it's Kent State. If there's going to be a high scoring game tonight, I think it's this one. And he's got decent receivers. It just is tough to look at this game log and really feel confident in it. Instead, excuse me, this was a frustrating one last week. Never heard of this guy. Justin Lynch and Rocky Lombardi were considered to be the guy who's either one or the other. And then all of a sudden, Lynch starts, runs it once, and then Cremascoli comes in. What a name. Anything special here? Not really, but he's super cheap. He's got some good targets and has done decent things on the ground. This is going to be a team that wants to run the football, so I would imagine their running backs are their better plays here, but it's hard not to think that, at 4,500, that's a nice little pivot. Other quarterbacks, Trayson Burgett. It looks like he's going to be the guy moving forward at, not the biggest of games last couple of weeks, but this is what we're working with, right? Mid-tier pricing, price range. 30 targets a game or 30 pass attempts a game, 7-8 rushing attempts. This is what we're kind of getting into, this range of areas. It almost, does it make sense to just not play him and use a running back instead as the second guy? I think the best plays of the night are going to be running backs. But we do have a weird situation here where quarterback is kind of a running back, Jace Bauer, 14 and 16 carries. He's found the end zone. It seems like they're going to, let Richardson be the quarterback, and then Bauer is going to get a ton of usage on the ground, come in and situational stuff. But, do you hate paying 7,100 for a running back? Not really, and that's kind of what he is on a slate with not a ton of quarterback options. I actually don't hate this play, which I didn't think I would say today, but I think he's a decent option. I wouldn't want Richardson at that price. You need both to go well, kind of. The Central Michigan offense needs to really score 4 or 5 touchdowns, kind of like they did last week, right? Not thrilled about that in the passing game, especially with Joel Wilson out for this one. Believe that's everybody. Let's see. I would keep an eye on the Northern Illinois quarterback situation. Is conceivable that Lombardi or Ethan Hampton play. And let's see where they're priced at. 5,900 and 5,400. So both of them are good options there. Obviously, Lombardi would be the best guy there to roster. Looking at running backs, my top guy is going to be Sean Tyler. So, 50% usage guy. The offense struggled last week, so not a big number, but 26 carries, 22 carries, 19 carries. These are all really nice numbers. And he's put up some big games so far this year. So a reliable player of sorts. In terms of projections, he's my highest. If you're asking me who I like the most, though, it's going to be Marquez Cooper. He's projected only half a point less, so he's really close. But, you can see why, right? 32 carries, 28 carries. This is a guy that's going to get 60, 65% of touches on the ground. And it's only going to be even more important if those injuries happen. I think he benefits both ways, right? If that offense has the receivers back, they're going to move the football better, more touchdowns. If they're banged up, if they don't play, there's going to be probably a heavier emphasis on Cooper. And when they do get down in the end zone, you're pretty much looking at Schley or Cooper, and that's it, running the football. So I would consider him probably my highest owned player of the slate or close to it. Lou Nichols is back, the surprise return. Everybody knows him. He's a 70 to 75% type guy. So, who knows if they do that this week. 28 carries was actually only about 55% of carries for the team last week. Didn't see him in the passing game much, but, those are things that he can do, right? We see these numbers early. Really like him, and as the second highest price guy, that's something nice. A lot of running backs here, by the way. Harrison Whaley. So, we talked about it last week. Him and Ontario Brown both seem to really kind of be like 40% of carries each, like side by side, just kind of doing that. But something happened. Ontario Brown got in the doghouse early, and all of a sudden it became the Whaley show. I think there's no risk in him at 6,800. And he has plenty of upside because if he is the lone back again, he's going to have a ton of usage there. His counterpart, obviously, is this Ontario Brown. Lots of risk here, better price, but do they go back to the kind of the 1A 1B, or do they let Whaley be the guy? They've been unpredictable the entire season, so to think last week that we would have seen this, something reliable and projectable is just comical. That's on me. High risk play, but high reward play. If he is that 1B, these are 2 games right here where he's 1B, right? So plenty of upside, but lots of risk there. Then it kind of drops off. You get the Buffalo guys, Mike Washington, Ron Cook. How do you project them? They basically ran it like 23, 24 times, and Snyder had, I think, like 16 of them. I think, right, a lot of those were sacks probably, but I don't really know who the guy is here, right? Mike Washington had technically more snaps or more carries with 6, and he's had a bunch in the past, but hasn't done a whole lot with them. Probably just going to avoid this situation considering all the other options. Other guys to consider here would be the Bowling Green guys, kind of the same situation, right? We thought Jason Patterson was going to be the guy. He's seen the majority of carries in the past. Awful offense. Did they just switch to the more agile pass catcher and Teron Keith? Maybe. But, both of these guys are priced a little bit too aggressive for what I like here. And again, just so many options. Why would you do that to yourself? The only, the pivot to that, or the counter idea to that, would be maybe, that Kent State game goes fast, right? We've seen that happen in the past. That could be a really high scoring game. And if that's the case, who do you target on Bowling Green? I think Keith and Patterson are going to be pretty low owned with the pricing and the options. If you think that's how that game goes, then that's certainly a way to look at it. Let's see. And then really that's about it. There's, 7 guys projected at 10 or more points, covered them all. I think the Buffalo and Bowling Green guys are the riskiest, will be the lowest owned. I think Bowling Green guys have the upside, while the Buffalo guys, I don't know if that really makes sense, to be honest. So I don't really see a whole lot of reason to do that to yourself. Receivers, again, see 8 guys at 10 points or better. I didn't even really project the Kent State guys. I didn't really change anything based on what happened last week. You can't really. I just went off of the season. If you look at these guys, Walker and Cephas are 1 and 2, right? Like, when they're healthy, they have incredible upside, get tons of targets, and can break a slate. So, you just see the big plays, the big fantasy point numbers. Bowling Green, again, not super impressive. They have the highest total, and it should be fairly close to the game. Now, let's talk of the options if one or both are hurt. Poke, let's call him Poke last week like an idiot. Poke is really going to be your next best option. If one of those guys is out, he becomes really kind of an automatic play here at that $4,900 price. I think he had like 18 targets last week. So, it's really hard not to like him. The other guy there would be Raymond James. I wonder if he's named after the Bucs Stadium. He looked pretty good. He didn't really put up a big game, but in terms of watching the game, I thought he looked pretty decent. I believe he's a young guy. So you would want both these guys to be hurt to play him, but certainly in the rotation if one of them or both of them are out. Now, looking at the other options away from Kent State, Corey Crooms, top guy. He had a big game alongside Bourget. Looking at the numbers, it looks like he had all the passing yards almost. So touchdowns, and let's see, 4 of the last 5. Decent PPR usage, considering the slate. He feels like a really good play. I would worry maybe a little bit of like, is this a grind the clock out type game with the running games? But I don't think you can get too kind of crazy in that regard. But really like Crooms. The Buffalo guys, the receivers for Buffalo are intriguing to me. Queen Williams, nothing crazy, but 26-27% of targets go his way. Justin Marshall had a really nice game last week. These are going to be a little bit of pivot type options to your Kent State guys. And people still don't think of Buffalo as a passing team. So some options there for you. Bowling Green. We talked about Hilaire last week. He did pretty well. I think he had double-digit targets as well. So he's kind of caught on. Even with a bad game by Matt McDonald, he had a nice game. 9 catches for 51 yards. Don't love that price. I love the game and the matchup. So I think I would maybe lean him over like a Justin Marshall and a Williams. But that's getting close to that danger zone of who I want to consider. Broden, a sprinkle maybe like a game stack type situation. You could consider him. Fannin has become a decent usage guy, rushing touchdowns in 3 straight. They just have to move the ball. If they don't move the ball, then you're in trouble because you're hoping for those goal line touches, which he's getting. They just, last week just didn't move it at all. So I like Fannin. I think at that price, that's a decent play. And he should remain low owned, but tough to say. Other options here. If you wanted to look at Western Michigan again, Jelani Galloway could be a guy to think about. None of these numbers are going to impress you, so I wouldn't get too crazy about the game logs past, Crooms and maybe Hilaire and the Kent State guys. Really, you're just trying to target high target usage, the Vegas totals that are decent, so you got to consider there as well. Final options. Let's talk Central Michigan for a second. So Joel Wilson's out for season. He got injured last week. Really good tight end for them. Who steps in is the question. And let's see here. Kieft got some play last week. 2 targets, 3 targets. And then the other guy is Conley. Conley got 3 targets. He played something like 60 out of 80 snaps. So I think he's going to be the guy that benefits the most. But again, which one's the pass catcher? He could have been in as more of a blocker and just lucked into some targets. I don't think you want to really do that to yourself. I think there's some other options there in the 3-4K range. But if you did want to pivot a little bit and get someone cheap, you could do it. There's the train of thought, maybe we see Carrier get more targets. I don't mind this at all compared to some of these other 5K, 6K options. And then same with Jalen here. He's kind of a bigger guy transferred in. Does he see some targets, right? Does he bump from receiver 3 to 2? I kind of like this play and hoping that maybe people think about it more as tight end to tight end instead of, third target to second target type of change with that injury. Now, I think I covered everybody. Let's see. Oh, Northern Illinois. How could I forget? Cole Tucker is your guy here at the top, but expensive, unreliable play. If it's not Rocky Lombardi or even maybe Hampton, I'm not playing him with Nevin Cremascali at quarterback. That just looks like a brutal offense. Rutkuich, I don't know. It feels like you're getting a little tricky when you do stuff like this, but I guess at that price. And Shamar Thornton, I believe he led the team in targets last week. Still only went for 5 for 49. So not thrilled with those options. This is a pretty ugly slate past the top guys. Let's look at kind of building a lineup here and go with the 2 reliable, in a sense, quarterbacks, the guys we know are going to play. Maybe not. Cooper, I like Cooper the most. I like Lou Nichols the most. Now we're getting kind of thin at these remaining salaries. So it's really hard to say, right? Like, let's just assume Cephas and Walker play. We can probably fit these guys in. We just have to get it, a little cheap. Let's see. Want to look to the side here and see who are some of these guys. I mean, Fannon's probably the guy I would want the most in terms of like cash games. And then here you can do pretty much whatever, right? I got 4 Kent State guys. It makes sense to have a Bowling Green guy here. Maybe go Sims. Could go McGahee here. It's really hard not to love these Kent State guys. Let's assume that Cephas is out, or we don't know. You want to risk it. You have other options here to play with. Williams, Galloway, Marshall, Hilaire, all in there. What if we just got rid of Snyder and went 1 quarterback? It's not a horrible idea at all. Tyler's my best rated guy, and look at how that opens up the salary, right? Like, I could move McGahee over here, or maybe go like Hilaire, and then I still have a bunch of room for somebody here. I want to get up to Whaley. So what about just going down and seeing who's available at this range? This would be like that Kieft. I think Kieft and you know what? I wanted to get rid of Lair, not Fannin. This would be like that Kieft Conley range, but you could certainly fit something like this and spread it out a little bit better doing it this way. I want to enter them actually. Now that I'm here. Somebody wanted FanDuel action. I don't usually play FanDuel, but let's take a quick look at some different things here. See if anybody jumps out at me. I bet Cremascali is super. He's not that cheap. Wouldn't touch that. What about Bauer? 10K is expensive. Schley's the highest guy. Snyder probably feels the most reliable there. Burgett's cheap, but that's a sketchy situation. So I don't necessarily love that. Running back's probably going to be the bread and butter. I would really not lean on doing 2 quarterbacks. Maybe in a cash game that makes sense, but I don't think in a tournament it does, considering all these running backs, right? I can go, man, there's just a bunch of them. Terry Brown's really cheap for his upside. I like that as a tournament play. Let's see, anybody down here? Wonder if that's related to the Sia Bangura. All right, let's go to receiver and check those guys out. All right, Walker's the most expensive. That makes sense. So these two are playable in pricing. I don't think they're priced out. Poke is an option, of course. Hilaire is pretty cheap. That's a good play there, I think. Jalen here is good. Fannin, I think things are a little bit different in FanDuel, right? You're more looking for touchdowns and yards, so I think Fannin actually could be decent there just because of the rushing touchdown situation. But yeah, it gets... Let's see. Keith is super cheap. I would imagine Conley is as well. 5K. So let's see what I got here. 9,000 remaining. Let's just assume that... I don't know. Why wouldn't you just assume that one of these guys plays? And then super flex, I think Schlee really is going to be your next best guy. And receiver, 6,600. I think I would go Jalen here. But, if you wanted to go super flex and go running back, you could do Cooper, have 7,600 remaining. I need to get better at the... there we go. You could go Poke. Let's say that Cephas was out. Poke there would be great. Does it make sense to double stack Schlee but not actually use him? I think maybe, considering his price. But something to consider for sure. Williams is a decent option there as well. Carrier as well. You can get a little creative with what you're trying to do here. Let me play around with it just a little bit more here. See if that changes things. Marshall gives you another option to maybe go with Colt Snyder. So some different options there. Hope everybody enjoys the games. Can't believe people are watching this considering the slate. But then again, I'm also making a video for it. So who am I to call a sicko or a degen? Here we are, guys. Enjoy the games tonight. Hope everybody has a good time and good luck.